Hey everyone, Anthony here from MTG Alpha. I have a deck tech here. Gonna go over Juri, Master of the Revue. Juri is a 2-mana 1/1, cost a black and a red. Whenever you sacrifice a permanent, put a +1/+1 counter on Juri. When Juri dies, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. So this is a Rakdos Aristocrat sacrifice deck, and we're going to sacrifice creatures, specifically any kind of creature, tokens, non-tokens. I try to stay away from cards that say whenever you sacrifice a non-token, like anything that refers to a non-token creature. I try to keep that out of the deck in order to keep this more optimized, because tokens are easy to generate. There are plenty of ways we can generate lots of tokens, and that's what we want to use to sacrifice them in order to trigger these other abilities in the deck. And you can also make Juri unblockable, swing for lethal commander damage very easily, and you can also just keep destroying, sacrificing Juri, bring it back because it's only 2. There are a lot of ways to bring cards back from your graveyard in here. So Juri ends up being a fun little commander to play around. So starting us off, we have Animation Module. It is a 1-mana artifact. Whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are placed on a permanent you control, you may pay 1. If you do, create a 1/1 servo. So that combos. Juri gets, you sacrifice a permanent, you get a +1/+1 counter on Juri. When that happens, you pay 1, you create a servo. You can sacrifice the servo, put a counter on Juri, pay 1, and then just make Juri huge. And yeah, so this is one part of a combo piece along with Juri. Next we have Skull Clamp. Equipped creature gets +1/-1. Whenever equipped creature dies, you get to draw 2 cards. So all those tokens in the deck we can use to gain some card drawing 2 cards, which is great. Bitter Blossom. 2-mana enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life and create a 1/1 black fairy rogue creature token with flying. Really good card for generating tokens. You could use like Dreadhorde Invasion, and just either it gets bigger and then you sacrifice it later and you kind of feel bad about it, or you just sacrifice it. It's a decent budget alternative to Bitter Blossom if you can't get your hands on it. But Bitter Blossom. It's a really good, like a really good card in this deck. Necromancy. Some graveyard incursion, 3-mana enchantment. You can choose a card in any graveyard, place it on the battlefield under your control with necromancy attached to it. When this enchantment is destroyed, you also destroy that creature. Victimize. 3-mana sorcery. Choose 2 target creature cards in your graveyard. Sacrifice a creature. If you do, put the 2 chosen cards into play tapped. Really good. Malakir Rebirth. Choose target creature. You lose 2 life until end of turn. That creature gains. When this creature dies, return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. So if there's something specifically that we want to keep, we can sacrifice it and immediately bring it right back. Or better, if an opponent tries to destroy one of our creatures, we can just cast this real quick, and instead of it dying, it just comes right back to the battlefield. And it also is can tap. We could play the flip side of it to tap it for black mana if we need that. Whisper Silk Cloak. It's an artifact. It makes equipped creature unblockable and has Shroud. So we can equip Juri and swing for lethal commander damage, since it would be unblockable. And also it having Shroud is kind of a plus, even though at some point we might want to just sacrifice Juri and deal that damage to any target. Smallpox does what this card basically summarizes what this whole deck does. Each player loses a life, they discard a card, sacrifices a creature, then sacrifices a land. I did forget to mention actually that this is secretly a Tergrid deck. So Tergrid is such a good card and happens to be really good in this deck. It fits really well. So essentially, If we can get Juri out as our commander, we can do all these things that we're doing regardless, which doesn't matter which one of these are out. It's going to benefit us either way. And then after we've, you know, sacrificed Juri, brought it back from the dead, and played that game for a little while, once the mana cost gets a little too expensive, by then we should hopefully have Tergrid out. 4/5 with Menace. Whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-token permanent or discards a permanent card, you may put that card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. It does have a flip side, but I really don't ever play it. Here's what it is. Target player loses 3 life unless they sacrifice a non-land permanent or discards a card, and you can pay for it to untap it. But I really just try to get Tergrid out and have some fun with that. Definitely a salty card. So Smallpox works with both of those. They lose a life, discard a card, hopefully a permanent. We get that with back with Tergrid on our battlefield, and then they sacrifice a land, which we would get. So that is extremely powerful card. Fraying Omnipotence. Each player loses half their life, discards half the cards in their hand, sacrifices half the creatures they control, rounded up each time. It is almost the same thing as Smallpox, but better. It doesn't target lands, but that is really, really good in this deck. Dictate of Erebos. It's a 5 mana enchantment with flash, so you can cast it at instant speed. Whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent sacrifices a creature. And again with Tergrid, if we have Tergrid out, then that ends up entering the battlefield under our control. So here we have some card draw, Faithless Looting, draw, what is it? It's like draw 2, discard 2, and then it has flashback for 3. Yep. Another Japanese alternative art version. Village Rites, 1 mana instant. You sacrifice a creature, draw 2 cards. Pretty good. There is a card that is possibly better now. 2 mana instant. You draw a card and lose 1 life. As an additional cost to cast this spell, you may sacrifice 1 or more creatures, and when you do, you copy the spell for each creature you sacrificed. There's only upsides to that in this deck, so we're drawing lots of cards with that. Wheel of Misfortune, a slightly confusing card draw card. I have a few copies of this. Whenever I pull it, I try to put it in a deck, so it forces myself to understand the card better, but each player secretly chooses a number 0 or greater, then all players reveal those numbers simultaneously and determine the highest and lowest numbers revealed this way. Wheel of Misfortune deals damage equal to the highest number to each player who chose that number. Each player who didn't choose the lowest number discards their hand, then draws 7 cards. I don't think I can actually explain this thoroughly or clearly or confidently, so I'm not really going to, but yeah, it's a fun card. It's kind of just a fun card, not necessary in this deck, but like I said, I threw it in here to force myself to use it, to try to understand it better. I still don't know if it's a good card or not, or an okay card or a great card, but one day we'll figure that out. Sign in Blood. This is some more card draw, so losing life, drawing cards. It's like lose 1 life, draw 2, I believe. Read the Bones, scry 2, draw 2, lose 2. Ashnod's Altar, sacrifice a creature, add 2 colorless to your mana pool. I believe this was the combo with Animation Module. So we sacrifice a creature, get a +1/+1 counter on Juri. We get 2 colorless mana. We can use 1 of that to create a colorless servo, so that way we net 1 mana. We sacrifice the servo to Ashnod's Altar, gain 2 colorless, token on or counter on Juri, then we create a token. So then we end up with infinite colorless mana, infinite +1/+1 counters on Juri. Then eventually we can just sacrifice Juri and deal that much damage to an opponent. So we could at least take out one player. Astronaut Altar is a great card. Can you believe it was an uncommon? Card's not cheap anymore. Arcane Signet. We all know what that does. We're adding 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. So there are other sort of rampy cards in here. Revel in Riches. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, create a colorless treasure artifact token that sacrifices and adds 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 10 or more treasures, you win the game. It's very possible to win the game with that second ability here in this deck, but with all the creatures that our opponents are going to be sacrificing and destroying, then we just at least get to ramp very nicely. This deck does not have a problem with mana. If anything, I believe I added an X spell card in here. I'm not quite sure if it's actually in the deck, but what I've noticed with this deck is mana, not a problem. Things to do with all that mana, a problem. It's mostly a lot of cheap cards, like 2-3 mana cost, and it's easy to bring stuff back to the graveyard and all of that. So I'm really just trying to draw cards and play everything else I can because mana is not an issue. Commander Sphere, we got that in the deck. Calling the Weak, sacrifice a creature, add 4 and for 1 black. Unmarked Grave, 2 mana sorcery, search your library for a non-legendary card, put that card into your graveyard, then shuffle. So this is part of our tutors. We have Demonic Tutor, Diabolic Intent, 2 mana sorcery, as additional cost, sacrifice a creature, search your library for a card and put that into your hand. It's very similar to Demonic Tutor, except we have to sacrifice a creature, but that's fine. We want to sacrifice creatures. Profane Tutor is Demonic Tutor, but it has Suspend 2. We pay 2, suspend it for 2 turns, search our library for a card, put it into our hand. There it is. Yeah, so Death Cloud was a card that I really wanted to add to this because we definitely can play an X spell card. Each player loses X life, discards X cards from their hand, sacrifices X creatures, and sacrifices X lands. This is a game-winning card for 2 reasons. One, the obvious, you can just end up draining them for enough, and you can get the creatures and whatever cards they discard and the lands all go onto the battlefield under your control with the Tergrid. But also, even if that doesn't actually win you the game, most of the time people are just going to end up scooping because it's pretty frustrating to have to deal with that. It's almost win by default. Vona's Hunger, sort of similar style, like board wipe to some of the other cards in here. 3 mana instant, each opponent sacrifices a creature. If you have the City's Blessing, each opponent sacrifices half the creatures rounded up. So there are a lot of like cheaper cost cards that are essentially board wipes. This is instant speed too, so that's really good. So stuff like Death Cloud, we got Vona's Hunger, and then what were the other ones, like Smallpox, yeah, but what was it, Frey and Omnipotence. That's stuff that like sacrifices half their permanents, ends up being really good. Liliana's Triumph, each opponent sacrifices a creature. If you control a Liliana Planeswalker, each opponent also discards a card. We have in this deck a few Liliana Planeswalkers. So we take a look at the Planeswalkers real quick, because Liliana's just perfect in decks like this. Liliana Dreadhorde General, whenever a creature you control dies, draw a card. We can +1 to create a 2/2 black zombie. Each player sacrifices a creature for -4, and then -9. The ultimate is each opponent chooses a permanent they control of each permanent type and sacrifices the rest. Professor Onyx, I just love the artwork and I love the card here. So it's, not as good as some of the other Lilianas in here, but each opponent sacrifices a creature with the greatest power among creatures they control for -3. +1, you can lose a life and basically look at the top 3 cards of your library. 1 goes in your hand, the rest in the graveyard. So yeah, we have some graveyard recursion stuff, so that's cool. Each opponent may discard a card. If they don't, they lose 3 life. Repeat this process 6 more times for -8. I haven't played this card yet, actually, at all. So I definitely haven't had the chance to ultimate Professor Onyx, but it's a new card, so I wanted to add it to the deck and play it out. Liliana, Waker of the Dead. Each player discards a card. Each opponent who can't loses 3 life. Target creature gets -X until end of turn, where X is the number of cards in your graveyard. And then you get an emblem with, at the beginning of combat on your turn, put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. It gains haste. So pretty good. So far, Liliana Dreadhorde General is the best one here. Oh wait, there's Liliana of the Veil, classic Liliana. 3 mana, enters with 3 loyalty counters. +1, each player discards a card, good. -2, target player sacrifices a creature, great. And -6, separate all permanents target player controls into 2 piles. They sacrifice all permanents in the pile of their choice. Really good, and with Tergrid, that is just extra salty. Tevesh Szat, Doom of Fools. This is actually a really good one. If I were to say out of all the Planeswalkers, if I could only keep, a few of them, it would have to be these 3 right here. The other 2 are kind of just extra, because why not? But these definitely do some work in this deck. +2, create 2 0/1 Black Thrall creature tokens. +1, you may sacrifice another creature or Planeswalker. If you do draw 2 cards, then draw another card if the sacrifice permanent was a commander. But sacrificing a creature and for +1 and drawing 2 cards is great, especially when we can also use the same Planeswalker to create the tokens. -10, gain control of all commanders. Put all commanders from the command zone onto the battlefield under your control. I haven't had a chance to activate that ability, but it's kind of unnecessary because this card is really powerful in this deck with just those 2 other abilities. So yeah, that is the Planeswalkers. Targeted removal. Bedevil, destroy target artifact, creature, or Planeswalker for 3, instant speed. Innocent Blood, each player sacrifices a creature. Soul Shatter, each opponent sacrifices a creature or Planeswalker with the highest converted mana cost among creatures and Planeswalkers they control. 3 mana, instant speed. Chaos War, target permanent, the owner of target permanent shuffles it into their library, then reveals the top card of their library. If it's permanent, they put it onto the battlefield. 3 mana, instant speed. Tragic Slip, really good card. 1 mana, instant. Target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn. It gets -13/-13 until end of turn if a creature had died. That is relevant. Damnation, just straight up 4 mana sorcery, destroy all creatures, they can't be regenerated. And then we have a bunch of creatures here. Those are all just lands. So yeah, we have in this deck Mayhem Devil. Whenever a player sacrifices a permanent, Mayhem Devil deals 1 damage to any target. Any player sacrificing any permanent. God Eternal Bantu, 5 mana, 5/6 with Menace. When it enters the battlefield, sacrifice any number of other permanents, then draw that many cards. That's a lot of triggers when we sacrifice stuff. And then when it dies, you get to, or is put into exile from the battlefield, you get to shuffle it, put it into the owner's library, 3rd from the top. Fane the Broker has a lot of abilities. 3 mana, 3/3, you can tap it to sacrifice a creature and put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature. You could also choose to tap it and remove a counter from a creature you control. So it puts a counter on a creature. It could, you sacrifice a creature, you can put a counter on a creature. If you remove a counter, you can create a treasure token. You can sacrifice the token or any artifact to create a token, a 2/1 Flying Inkling, and you can pay 4 to untap it. So really does a lot. Each ability is relevant to the preceding ability. Archon of Cruelty, really good card, but it's got a high mana cost, so that's why we want to try to discard this or search it, tutor it, put it in the graveyard, and cheat it onto the battlefield. It's an 8 mana 6/6. I don't plan on hard casting this, but honestly, if it's later in the game, we can do that easily. It's a flyer. Whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, target opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker, discards a card, and loses 3 life. You draw a card and gain 3 life. It does a lot. It's a really cool card. High mana cost, which is fair, but it's still pretty high. Priest of Forgotten Gods, you can tap it, sacrifice 2 other creatures, any number of target players each lose 2 life, and sacrifice a creature, and you get to add 2 black mana to your mana pool and draw a card. A lot of versatile abilities on these creatures. Reassembling Skeleton is something that we can sacrifice and just continuously bring back. You can pay 2 to return it from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. It costs 2 as well, so you're just constantly casting it. Hell's Caretaker. Tap, sacrifice a creature, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Great. Activate this ability only during your upkeep. So we can untap, upkeep trigger. If we have Bitter Blossom, we can have that ability resolve first, sacrifice the token that we create from Bitter Blossom. So we create that token, tap this, sacrifice it, return a creature card from our graveyard to the battlefield, maybe Archon of Cruelty, or anything else that managed to end up in there, whether by our own doing or our opponent's. Dockside Extortionist, 2 mana 1/2. When it enters the battlefield, create X treasure tokens, where X is the number of artifacts and enchantments your opponents control. So that, and there are a few other ways we can produce treasure tokens here. With Revel in Riches, it can be a win condition. Gadrick, at the beginning of your end step, create a treasure token for each non-token creature that died this turn. That's just in general, not just on your side of the battlefield. So with that, and we have Impulsive Pilferer. When it dies, create a treasure token. We could also pay 4 to create a token copy for each opponent, and it gets haste, and then it dies, and then we get some more treasure tokens. So Dockside Extortionist could help us win the game with Revel in Riches, but either way, all of those treasures are going to be good to sacrifice, which will trigger other abilities and also generate us mana. Ayara, First of Locthwain, 3 mana, 2/3. Whenever Ayara or another black creature enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. You can sacrifice another black creature, tap Ayara, and draw a card. Merciless Executioner. When it enters the battlefield, each player sacrifices a creature. Also, Plaguecrafter does the same exact thing. Not sure if I have the Fleshbag Marauder in here. No, I took that out to add in some other card. Goldspan Dragon. Whenever Goldspan Dragon attacks or becomes the target of a spell, create a treasure token. Treasures you control can add 2 mana of any one color instead of 1 when you tap it and sacrifice it. It's a 4/4 with flying and haste. Pretty cool card. Grave Titan helps produce tokens and is also just an absolute beast. 6 mana 6/6 with Death Touch. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, put 2/2 black zombie creature tokens onto the battlefield. We do have another one of the Titans here. Kroxa, 2 mana 6/6, enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless it escaped, which is good. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, each opponent discards a card. Each opponent who didn't discard a non-land card this way loses 3 life. And then it has an escape cost, which we can continuously pay from it being in the graveyard. So that's really good. Zulaport Cutthroat. Whenever this card or another creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 and you gain 1. Also, Blood Artist does very much the same thing. Whenever Blood Artist or another creature dies, target player loses 1 and you gain 1. So this is only if a creature you control dies, but each opponent is going to lose 1 life. This is if any creature dies, but only target player loses 1 and you gain 1. Magus of the Wheel, we can pay 2, sacrifice it. Each player discards their hand, then draws 7 cards. Card draw for us, sacrifice trigger, and then with Tergrid or something like that, we can take things out of their graveyard, or with Tergrid we can just place those directly on the battlefield under our control if it's a permanent. Mogis, God of Slaughter. Really, really cool card. 4 mana, 7/5. Indestructible. As long as your devotion to black and red is less than 7, it's not a creature, it's just an enchantment. That is also indestructible. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, Mogis deals 2 damage to that player unless they sacrifice a creature. They're going to take the 2 damage for as long as they can, and it's going to help just get us closer to winning the game. Rankle, Master of Pranks. 4 mana, 3/3, flying haste. Whenever Rankle deals combat damage to a player, you get to choose any number of these. Each player discards a card. Each player loses 1 life and draws a card. Each player sacrifices a creature. Each one of those are extremely relevant. Sheoldred, Whispering One. 7 mana, 6/6 with Swamp Walk. Can't be blocked as long as the defending player controls a swamp. More importantly though, at the beginning of your upkeep, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. That's triggering on your upkeep. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, they sacrifice a creature. They sacrifice a creature on their upkeep now, and we get to return one from our graveyard to the battlefield. We can sacrifice Juri, sacrifice a bunch of stuff, build up Juri, sacrifice Juri, bring it back each upkeep. Ghoulcaller Gishath. Really like this card. You can pay a black, tap, sacrifice another creature, and create X 2/2 black zombie creature tokens, where X is the sacrificed creature's power. So even if we sacrifice a 1/1, so we'll get 1 2/2 zombies. Then we sacrifice that 2/2 zombie, we get 2 2/2 zombies. And then each time we sacrifice a 2/2 zombie, we get 2 2/2 zombies. So we can pay 1 and get 2 zombies. Pitiless Plunderer. Whenever another creature you control dies, create a colorless treasure artifact token. I forgot that this also produces tokens, treasure tokens, so more stuff that synergizes well with Dockside Extortionist and Revel in Riches. Magus of the Coffers. Pay 2, tap it, add black to your mana pool for each swamp you control. This is, if you haven't noticed, this actually really is more of like a mono black deck with red as support. That's why this is a Juri deck and not a Tergrid deck, because there are a lot of cool red cards that I wanted to utilize. Sidisi Undead Vizier. Death Touch, Exploit. When it enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice a creature. If you do, you get to search your library for a card, put it into your hand. So it has that tutor ability. Sacrificing creatures is good as well. And then Solemn Simulacrum. Those are all the creature cards in the deck. I can go over the lands real quick. Command Tower, Ghost Quarter, because anything that says sacrifice we want to have in here. So tap, sacrifice, destroy target land. Its controller may search his or her library for a basic land, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle their library. Got some swamps here, a cycling land, Terramorphic Expanse, another card that we could tap and sacrifice. Filter land, Urborg. Each land is a swamp in addition to its other types. So Magus of the Coffers ends up generating us a lot more mana. Oh, right there. More swamp, Temple of Malice, a scry land. We have a slow fetch here. These are nice budget alternatives to fetch lands, although those have dropped in price. But I still run them. I still like them. Mountain, Blightstep Pathway. It comes in, taps it for black, or you could pay the flip side of it and it taps for red. Cabal Coffers, like Magus of the Coffers. Pay 2, tap it, and add black for each swamp you control. It is the same card, but this costs 5 mana because it's a creature. This is a land. Blood Crypt, Shockland. This is a newer card. Hostile. Taps for colorless. You can pay 1, sacrifice a creature, put a soul counter on this. Then if there are 3 or more soul counters on it, remove those counters and transform it, and then untap it. That transforms into this cool little card here, Creeping In. So like the whole house like comes alive, which is cool. Whenever Creeping In attacks, you may exile a creature card from your graveyard. If you do, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the number of creature cards exiled. And then you can pay 4 to have it phase out. It is a 3/7. So it's not a bad card, really. It's a fun card. And it fits what this deck does. Bloodfeld Caves, so we can gain some life when it enters. Bloodstained Mire, our Rakdos fetch land. Opal Palace, Swamp. Sulphurous Mire, it's a swamp mountain, so it's fetchable. Rogue's Passage, pay 4, target creature can't be blocked this turn. Phyrexian Tower, tap it, sacrifice a creature, add 2 black to your mana pool, or tap and add colorless. Evolving Wilds, High Market, sacrifice a creature, you gain a life. Prismatic Vista, tap, pay 1 life, sacrifice it, search your library for a basic land, put it on the battlefield, then shuffle. Fable Passage, tap, sacrifice it, search for a basic land. If you control 4 or more lands, untap it. Swamp, Carekeep, we can pay 2, tap, create a 0/1 red Cobalt creature token. So we can produce tokens with that land. Castle Locthwain, pay 3, tap it, draw a card, and then you lose life equal to the number of cards in your hand. Smoldering Marsh, Rakdos Guildgate, and a Dragon Skull Summit. So yeah, that's the deck. Let me know what you guys think. I'm gonna have a link in the description that will have the deck list. It should be updated as well. I'd like to hear your suggestions, what you think that you would add to the deck or remove. What do you like? What do you not like? Let me know in the comments below. I do appreciate you watching this video. If you want to support the channel, there's links. You can find links in the description, and you could also join the Discord, where we have people that you can play Spell Table. We can arrange playing Brawl, Arena, all that sort of thing, and just go over like deck tech ideas and suggestions and all of that. So yeah, like the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe for more episodes. I do appreciate all of the support, and until then, I'll see you next time. Peace.